The Bengals travel to Atlanta for preseason game number 2. Let's break down the top things to watch for as this Bengals roster tries to put itself together.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Lisco. He's your host, James Rapine. We're on the Locked On Podcast Network covering your team every day, and you can find the show on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcasts. And it makes it really easy when you subscribe to the podcast to become a first listener, making us your first listen every day, whether that's when you're taking your dog out for a walk or you're making your morning coffee, driving to work. We appreciate all of you who make us your first listen and have made that a habit, so much to the point where you're an everyday or making us an everyday part of your life. We appreciate all of you who listen to the podcast and don't miss an episode. Today, we're going to get into the biggest things to watch for in the Bengals' second preseason game against the Atlanta Falcons. Today's show of Locked On Bengals brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, who helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. You can post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. James, before we get to preseason game number 2 against the Atlanta Falcons, the news on Thursday out of the court system in Southwest Ohio, Joe Mixon found not guilty of his misdemeanor charge of aggravated menacing. And maybe this just allows everybody to move on. We'll see if the NFL has anything to say about that. But the state, according to the judge, did not meet the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And Joe Mixon, as a result, not guilty.
I think we saw this coming really from day one of the trial. I was surprised it went 4 days. It did go 4 days. And obviously this is good news for the Bengals. They put out a statement, and I'll read part of it. Joe Mixon has been a valuable part of the Bengals since he joined the organization. The organization is pleased with this matter, that this matter is now behind everyone. And we look forward to an exciting season with Joe being part of the football team. I know internally the Bengals weren't expecting this to go any other route than the not guilty verdict. And I think after the trial started, you just talked to people around town, and that was just the way it was going. There just wasn't a lot of, and I'm not going to get too far into it, but there just wasn't a ton of evidence. And if you can't prove something in a criminal case, well, that's it. It's going to be not guilty. So hopefully Joe can put it behind him. I know he was happy, tweeted out a photo, posted a picture of himself in the courtroom on IG as well. And he's RB1. After they restructured his deal, reworked his deal, we knew that was going to be the case. And so you're right. The only thing that could potentially creep up is if the NFL, which they do a completely separate investigation, I'm told they've already investigated this, if they handed down any type of discipline. But Mixon's out of it as far as the criminal side goes. So we'll see if the NFL hands anything down. If not, he'll obviously be in the backfield for week 1 against the Browns.
And the Bengals kind of projected their confidence with this when they did the rework deal. They gave him those additional guarantees. They didn't bring in any of the running backs we've clamored for on this podcast throughout the offseason or in the last few weeks for any sort of role. I think that all projected a lot of confidence in the way this case was going to go. So that now in the rearview mirror, let's get into preseason game number 2, Atlanta Falcons. Reportedly playing their starters, the Bengals, as we discussed on yesterday's show for the everydayers. You already know this, but defensive starters expected to play for the Bengals. And there's some fun matchups there, especially DJ Turner out there, presumably, with these guys. Like we've talked about, we haven't seen Sidney Jones practicing this week. So if he's dealing with an injury, perhaps he doesn't play. That means a lot of run for DJ Turner with the starters, but a great opportunity to see these starters against an offense that is very versatile, very multiple, but probably not one of the scarier offenses in the league, despite some of their very scary skill players and guys like Bijan Robinson, Kyle Pitts, potentially Drake London. Desmond Ridder, we'll see what's going on there. Good work for these defensive number ones, and it'll be fun to see them getting some live action for a drive, hopefully a short drive, as Mike Hilton said, against these Atlanta Falcons.
It will. And you're right about the Falcons. I don't expect them to be a top offense in the NFL because we have questions about Desmond Ridder, but they have some unique matchups that make it really interesting for this first team defense. One, there is no Kyle Pitts on the Bengals. And this is a good test for the safety room. How do they use everyone's kind of talked about, all right, well, who's going to be the Trey Flowers? Will it be Dax Hill? Will it be a Jordan Battle at times? Will they use a hybrid between those two guys? Could they use one of these corners? I think that's part of it that's interesting is just seeing how they handle a Kyle Pitts who is dynamic, even though he's underperformed, I would say, through a couple of years. And I don't think it's really any fault of his own. I think it's the offense and the lack of quarterback play and play design, all of those things. But they have two good tight ends in Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith. So you're going to get tested there. Drake London is a big receiver. So DJ Turner, will he be matched up at all? Cam Taylor-Britt is not the biggest guy in the world. He's physical, he's strong, but it would be a good matchup for him as well. So I want to see those two guys in how they fare against a guy like London. Outside of the secondary, though, in pieces like that, I think we know what Mike Hilton is. I think we know what this front seven is. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it'll be nice to see some of the young guys attempt to tackle Bijan Robinson, maybe in the open field, right? I think that's an important part of this. The Falcons are going to be a run-first offense, mm-hmm. which is rare in this league. So will DJ Turner be able to come up and make that pop, even though he doesn't have the most size in the world? I think that's an interesting part, too. Do they throw a quick screen to London and Turner has to come up and make a play? Those are the type of things that I'll be looking for when it comes to the young pieces, the new pieces in the secondary. And the fact that Nick Scott's going to be out there, he's making his Bengals debut. So how do they use him? How do they use Dax Hill? I think that's a storyline in and of itself, regardless of the tight end usage on the Falcons side.
Yeah, I think those are all great points. A couple other matchups I'll point out that I think could just be fun from a strength-on-strength perspective. Chris Lindstrom and Jake Matthews, both really, really good offensive linemen. So Trey Hendrickson, Trey Hendrickson, Jake Matthews, left tackle for the Atlanta Falcons. That'll be fun. Matthews still a good pass protector. Chris Lindstrom, one of the best interior linemen in the league, one of the best run blockers in the league last year. And in general, like these are really good players, those two guys. So in the trenches, DJ Reader, BJ Hill against the interior, highlighted by Chris Lindstrom for the Falcons, and then the Trey Hendrickson, Jake Matthews battle, even though we'll only get it for very likely a handful of plays, that could yield some pretty fun tape to really dive into and dissect. So there are certainly some things for some of the newcomers, the safety cohesion. Do we see a 3-safety look? Do we see who's going to deal with Kyle Pitts? How does that go? How well equipped are the Bengals to deal with Kyle Pitts? How well equipped are the Bengals to deal with one of the better NFL rushing offenses that has now added Bijan Robinson to go with Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier, who have both been good for the Falcons? There's some things that are going to be really cool to watch, even if it is abbreviated in preseason and all those things. It's still some good matchups and some good tests for some newcomers.
For sure. I think I love that. I love that you put up and mentioned the trenches and Trey Hendrickson. Can you imagine what the camp he's had if he has like a strip sack on the second play from scrimmage, the Falcons' first possession, and it's like, yeah, we're playing the starters, and it was 2 plays. And we're talking about, how will this matchup be or that matchup? That's why I think deep down, if Lou Anarumo, if we gave him truth serum, he might say it wouldn't be the worst thing for them to give up a first down or 2 and for the Falcons to drive the ball just a little bit, maybe get to the 50. You start at the 25, get to the 50, and then force them to punt. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world just to get these guys some work. So we will see there if that happens. But I could totally see Trey Hendrickson continuing his stellar camp. And there's a lot, I think, defensive line-wise that we need to discuss. But I am excited to see the starters on defense. As we mentioned yesterday, no starters on offense. Not shocked by this. I do think it's the right call, even though some are wondering about the offensive line. Orlando Brown Jr. will be just fine next to Cordell Volson. And I think Jonah's going to be fine next to Alex Kappa. They can work through any potential communication issues and things like that between now and week 1.
Excited to see Bijan Robinson as well. in whatever capacity we see him, just as a player going against a good run defense with DJ Reader out there. That should be fun. Outside of the defensive starters, plenty of other things to watch for in this game. A lot of them on the offensive side of the ball, but still some guys on defense vying for jobs that we should talk about as well. We'll continue breaking down what to watch for coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best candidates available, and that's why you need to get LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to hire or interview and hire. It makes everything simpler, streamlined, efficient, and effective. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
James, more to talk about, of course, in preseason game number 2. Let's finish up on the defensive side of the ball here, where we've talked about the starters. Is Miles Murphy, if it is an extended drive, get in with the starters. Either way, do we see Miles Murphy? Reportedly wasn't at practice. We didn't talk about this yesterday. Did you see him at practice on Wednesday?
I would have to look closer. I can't recall one way or the other.
I saw
This is you.
One.
I don't know.
I don't know if it was Trags or if it was Charlie. Somebody tweeted that he wasn't out there.
Let me check the video here. I mean, I have a lot of video, so go ahead. We can address it in a minute.
Either way, Miles Murphy, sorry to put you on the spot again. I didn't learn my lesson yesterday. Miles Murphy getting some more reps against another team. Always going to be fun to watch. How much does Joseph Osai play? But all these backup defensive linemen, they're going to suit up this week. We'll see them all. So Josh Tupou will get some run. Jay Tufele will get some more run as he looks to solidify what sounds like a pretty good chance of making the roster for him. More work for all of these guys trying to get onto the roster. Always going to be great to see that work. Jeff Gunter, Raymond Johnson III, Terrell Basham not going to play, but Gunter and Johnson vying for practice squad spots as well, looking to continue to try to work on those claims. Dominique Davis, similarly, does he continue to flash? I don't think that any of these guys can quite make it interesting for the back of the roster, but certainly for practice squad stuff. And then Murphy, the big one, if we do see him, which hopefully we will, continuing to try to find ways to flash and show that first round promise, show off that first round athleticism that had the Bengals draft him.
Yeah, I don't see, I'm going through a bunch of videos here, first team, second team. I don't see Murphy in any of them. And so I might be dead off right here, but it doesn't look like it. I can't believe I didn't notice that in real time. But yeah, I don't see Miles Murphy. So what that tells me is, because I talked to him after practice on, what would it have been, Monday? And so what that tells me, and he was fine, is that he was dealing with some kind of ache issue. And they said, we need you Friday. Let's hold you out today. Because that was a starters heavy practice, especially for the offense. You wanted to get them a bunch of reps with Trevor Siemian and Jake Browning. So yeah, I think he'll be fine. How do they use him? That's a huge storyline. I think he's adjusting to life in the NFL right now, trying to find his way, find how he fits in a defensive line room that is stacked. We've talked about how good Trey Hendrickson has been. Obviously, Reader is as consistent in the middle of that defense. And Sam Hubbard was really, really good on Wednesday. We didn't talk about it from a practice observation, but I think he's rounding into midseason form, which is exactly what you want. You don't want him peaking at the start of camp. You want him to slowly get into that as we inch closer to the start of the regular season. And obviously he's coming off of a career year. So overall, it's going to be interesting to see how they use Murphy, where they put him, who's he out there with. Because you have Joseph Osai that I think you want to get reps for. Cam Sample continues to emerge. I think he's a big part of that defensive line. So those are two backups technically that we're talking about. And so does Murphy come in with those guys? Do we see that trio together with a Josh Tupou, for example? And then just continuing with the defensive line, will Dominique Davis make some kind of push here for Jay Tufele's roster spot.
Yeah, I talked
Tufele.
about that. I think that he has a very tough job getting into like an actual
well-
roster conversation, but certainly for the practice squad. I think he's
but
a guy they want.
But that's so because if he could make a push, and I'm not saying he would unseat Tufele, but if he could make a push, then there's going to be a team in the league that says, "Oh, we want that guy the moment he's cut." And so then, and we talked about the potential of trading a Jackson Carman. Well, if Davis emerges, do you entertain the idea of trading one of these DTs? Josh Tupou's in the last year of his deal. Could you do that? I'm not saying they would, and I know it's your guy, but I do think that there's almost there could be, at least over the next 2 weeks, you could look at it before cut down day and say we have a surplus at the defensive tackles that we like. Dominique Davis is going to get claimed. Do we try to shop a guy that's probably not going to be here a year from now?
I don't know if I'm buying that Dominique Davis is going to get claimed, even if he has another couple good games. Maybe. I've been wrong about these things before, but this feels like a classic case of preseason hype on a guy who's going to make it to the practice squad. Again, I've been wrong about these things before. A couple other guys on the defensive side of the ball that
anti-Dominique Davis.
I like him a lot. I just think that like that's the kind of player that gets to the practice squad quite frequently. They have
on this team. He'd be like their third DT 4 years ago. He'd be borderline
4 years
starting
ago.
for them.
4 years ago, they're
but there are
Christian
rosters.
Covington and
there are rosters like that in the league, though. That's what I'm saying. So
yeah,
are they going to pass on? That's the part that's tough.
He also, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Some other guys on this defense. I think the linebacker room, we've talked about that.
Ooh.
Not a whole lot that I'm interested in seeing out of those guys in particular. Get out of the game healthy. That's the biggest thing for that group. There's 5 guys that are very likely to be on the team, and that's that. Then you get to the secondary, and then it's DJ Ivey, Allen George, does Sidney Jones play, Jordan Battle, Tyson Anderson, these guys that we're all looking to continue to build on what's been, for most of them, a very productive preseason and training camp. And then for some of them, like the case of Allen George, who's had some upside, but didn't have the greatest game last week, to bounce back. And Sidney Jones, if he can play, to try to bounce back from the game last week. But I don't know. I'm not expecting that we'll see Sidney Jones after he missed all those practices.
I think he kind of needs it.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe he's like, people know what I am in the league anyways, but if he can play, I think it's important. That said, did you think that penalty was a penalty on George?
I don't remember. I don't know that I've actually watched that on all 22. And on the TV angle,
it set him up, obviously, for the touchdown. It was a huge play. It was a huge call.
He gets a pass breakup and he has his hand on the jersey. There's a little bit of a tug that you can see. I don't think it's called all the time. I don't know that it was material to the play, but it does get called sometimes. So
yeah,
it's not like a clear no call. Like it's not like there was no contact whatsoever. There is a jersey tug.
Because if that switches, I think he has a pretty solid debut. Like it's just wild how quickly.
He at least would have had an up and down day. Like he would have had a play to go with
yeah, and so that's interesting. I think that there's so much back end talk and discussion, and there's just not many spots, and it's just so tough. And that's why if you're Sidney Jones, man, look around. If you can suit up and you want to be on the team, I would suit up and show that you can lock up Matt Collins and go toe to toe with a speedster like Scotty Miller. And I know it sounds crazy, but that's what they need to see is some consistency from Sidney, it's weird because what happened last week is kind of what we've seen throughout camp, where he's in position and he's made some plays, but he's in position, but the receiver still catches it. And that's kind of been a theme. And so we'll see if he can fix that. So that's something to monitor, because I would never have called him a roster lock, but I thought he was certainly a favorite in going to make the roster coming into camp. And we don't have, at least I didn't have him on our 53.
We're talking about outside corner number 4 here, assuming Chidobe Awuzie is able to ramp it up here in the next couple of weeks and get ready for week 1, which has been our working assumption throughout preseason, assuming Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner are 1 through 3. We're talking about DJ Ivey, Sidney Jones for really outside corner number 4, because Jalen Davis seems to have backup slot locked up. Allen George getting some work there as well, but it's going to be Hilton and Davis. And then if they keep 6, which we're both back to thinking they're keeping 6 corners, you're talking about DJ Ivey, Allen George, Sidney Jones for that job. And yeah, I think if Jones can play, he should, but if he's hurt, he can't play. So that will bear watching. We should talk about the offense as well here. We've spent a lot of time on the offense this week. It's going to be some of the same, but obviously some themes carry over from preseason game number 1 as well. We'll get into the offense to finish up the show here coming up next.
Today's show is also brought to you by Streetside Brewing. We couldn't be more excited to have partnered with Streetside. They are local. They are in Cincinnati, and they are the spot you should go for whether it's game day this year, whether you're out of towner and you want to try a local beer, multiple local beers, you got to get to Streetside Brewing. And beer is all they make here. Family owned and operated since 2016. They're award winning from their pastry stouts, coffee blonde, brown ales, fruited sours. You can tailgate before every home game. They're going to have drinking food specials, games, prizes, and they have their New England IPA, fruited sour, or a good old boring beer like a lager. Streetside has something you're going to enjoy. And the best part, they're really close to downtown. So like I said, if you're an out of towner and you're looking to Uber somewhere, you want a good local Cincinnati vibe, well, they're at 4003 Eastern Avenue in Columbia, Tusculum, near Lunken Airport. 24 taps from full pints to 4 ounces. They have a size that will make you happy. And they also have a happy hour Monday through Friday from 4 to 6, and new beers dropping all the time. So get to Streetside Brewery today. You can check them out at streetsidebrewing.com, or like I said, in Columbia, Tusculum. Really, really excited about this partnership. If you know me, you know I like a good beer. I loved craft beer, and I love local. Support local with Streetside Brewing, and check out all 24 beers they have on tap today. It's all about the quarterbacks for me when it comes to the offense on Friday night. Will someone separate? Will someone be consistently solid, not consistently up and down in a roller coaster? Because these 2 backup quarterbacks have been that, Jake. They've been consistently the Diamondback at Kings Island, and that's probably the last ride I've ridden at Kings Island. So it's up and down all around. The difference is it hasn't been a smooth ride like Diamondback is. Diamondback smooth. It was like Son of Beast for the past 3 weeks or so. And so Trevor Simeon's going to get the start. He's not going to have Jamar Chase to throw to, but that's fine if you don't have Chase and Higgins and Boyd, because you still have good players like Trenton Irwin. If he plays at all, he's been really good this preseason or this training camp. If you have Andre Yosevich, he made multiple plays on Wednesday. Irwin made a play. So I think those 2 guys are pretty reliable. Charlie Jones is working through that shoulder. I think overall he's just learning how to play with it, and it's not a huge issue pain-wise, but hopefully he can bounce back a little bit, because I think it was up and down in his debut. That's a pretty fun trio to start throwing to, and I think those guys are going to get a lot of time. At least the 2 rookies will, in Yosevich and Jones.
Yeah, I think those are some of the big guys we're watching, right? It's quarterbacks, it's the offensive line battles we're waiting to resolve themselves, or for someone to emerge. It's the running backs, it's pass protection for those running backs. It's Travion Williams, doesn't sound like he's going to be able to play. It's Yosevich and Jones. There's also some pretty interesting players that they'll be playing against on this Atlanta defense. Old friends of the Cincinnati Bengals, Jesse Bates, Trey Flowers, old enemies, Calais Campbell being the chief among those, the former Baltimore Raven there. But there's some good and Bud Dupree, in fact, old friend, Pittsburgh Steelers before he spent time with the Tennessee Titans, who are also old enemies, I guess. But some interesting players on the defensive front for Atlanta for this backup offensive line to deal with, to try to give these quarterbacks a chance. That drive where you have the backup offensive line trying to deal with Grady Jarrett, Calais Campbell, Arnold Ebiketie, Bud Dupree, that'll be a real challenge for them, especially Grady Jarrett, who's still a freak in there. And then AJ Terrell, one of the better corners in the NFL, just in terms of some of the starters that we'll see for, I guess, maybe a drive for Atlanta. Jesse Bates, Jesse Bates against these quarterbacks seems a little scary in a revenge game kind of setting. Not really, it's a preseason game, but Jesse Bates wants to say, hey, look, I picked off your bad backup quarterbacks in a preseason game. I could see there being motivation there. And Trey Flowers. Do we see a Trey Flowers matchup with a tight end that we care about? I don't know. Tanner Hudson, probably still dealing with that concussion.
Yeah, we haven't seen him. We haven't seen Tanner. So I think that part's the tight end battle is interesting though. Like we know the first two guys. Who else? And if Hudson is out, and
there's no tight ends I'm interested in watching in this game. If
Wilcox is out. No, but Devin Asiasi has a chance to make his case for the 53. I think that's the part of it, because I don't think he's
played so well.
I don't know. I mean, he's a guy that they obviously kept on the roster most of last year.
Yeah.
And if Wilcox is hurt, if he plays okay, I think he could have the inside track. Like I wonder if we're overvaluing Hudson's production a bit.
Maybe.
And so it's another guy to watch. Obviously, this is huge for Jackson Carman. I think he needs to put out. And by the way, if he's just consistent and does what he did last week in the first half, maybe a little better at left tackle, I think you take that and that's fine. And whether it's trading him or feeling good about rostering him, you feel much better than you did with what he did in those last 11, 12 snaps or whatever it was in the fourth quarter last Friday.
But what I want to see from Carman is, sure, if you play a little bit at left tackle and you play well, great. But show me that you can play right tackle. Because this has been discussed, I think, around the Bengals media sphere in the last week. If they need a backup left tackle, that's Jonah Williams. And You're putting somebody at right tackle. And if Jackson Carman can't play right tackle, he's your third left tackle. What's he doing on the team? And so if you can play well at left tackle, great. Maybe you can work up some trade talks around a better game at left tackle, how he played in the postseason last year at left tackle, and say, hey, this guy can be a serviceable starting left tackle for some team that needs a left tackle. But for the Bengals, if all he can do is play left tackle, how valuable is that? Is I think a pretty good point that I've heard around the Bengals media sphere in the last week.
Odds are he's the third regardless, assuming you keep La'el Collins. Not week one, but by the time La'el's healthy, I don't really see a path.
Well, then there's a cut happening somewhere when LC comes off, or the other injuries have happened
somewhere. It might not be offensive line somewhere, and that's a conversation we can have later. But yeah, I agree. I think they also want to see Deontay Smith. So do you play Jackson at one tackle spot and then you flip it and he plays at the other for the second half? Do you play him the entire game? I wonder, or most of the game. I would tell him to be prepared to play 80 snaps and then go for
at both tackles.
160 snaps
at both tackle positions. Maybe some guard. Just to, I mean, they're not working him at guard at all.
He will not get guard reps.
I know, but I mean, if I'm the Bengals, I'm trying to play him everywhere. The way that they're trying to play Hakeem Adeniji everywhere, the way they're moving these guys around on the interior, the way that they're moving Deontay Smith from left to right.
That's the part of it is Adeniji could play both tackle spots, and so He can be one of those guys can be that third left tackle. To your point with Carman. And so if that's the case, surplus, trade calls, you could see the path.
You need somebody to want to take Jackson Carman. It's the issue there.
But that happens. Yeah. It happens all the time with these kind of linemen. I know.
Happened
like Cody Ford got traded once upon a time. Know.
I know. Trust me. It still takes two to tango, and we know that is a line we hear from the Bengals often, and it can be difficult. Other guys that have a big day coming up, I think Trey Hill, Max Sharping, we've talked about those guys in the last week as they're flipping between center and guard. Might be one spot for the two of those guys, unless Ben Brown makes a massive leap and gets himself into that conversation. Do we see Ben Brown and Nate Gilliam earlier in this game? That would tell you if they've got a real shot at making this roster, I think. But then it's the skill guys. Chase Brown, Chris Evans should get a lion's share of this ball game again. Again, looking for pass blocking reps. Again, looking for them to be comfortable in the run scheme, to do what they're supposed to do. on those running plays. Both of them flashed their ability, their athleticism, their traits in preseason game one. Chris Evans, I think, really trying quite hard and making quite a case for himself as a pass blocking back. Has another opportunity to do it here in a game. Chase Brown, can he improve? Was swimming upstream a little bit as a pass blocker in preseason game one. Those are things there. And we talked about these receivers. Will be another target heavy day for Yosavash. Can Charlie Jones have a more impactful game as he's trying to deal with that shoulder? Show us that he can play with the shoulder. Show us that he can be that guy off the bench. Because we're still waiting for those flashes, I think, from Charlie Jones in a game. And so that's something certainly that I'm watching for this week.
Maybe I have to put the hot take chain on for those watching at home. So I'll just go ahead and do that real quick here. Hot take chain going on. Jake saw it in person, by the way. It's very, very real. This isn't CGI. Charlie Jones is going to lead the Bengals in targets on Friday night.
All right.
There's your preseason hot take. Lead the Bengals in targets. Yoshi, take a rest. Charlie Jones, double-digit targets. And
fun.
I'll say 6 catches. 6 catches.
He should
10
catch
targets, 6 catches.
He should catch more of those targets than Yoshi
No,
did.
he shouldn't. Oh, then
What do
Yoshi
you
did.
mean, no, he
Maybe. Well, you realize who's throwing him the ball, right? Jake
I'm
Lisco.
I'm just comparing slot targets to back shoulder jump ball targets that Yoshi got. Like there's a difference in degree of difficulty in completing the catch there. What I want to see from Charlie Jones is how he's working after the catch on those plays, how he's sitting down in his zone, getting open and making himself a reliable target.
I saw Trevor Siemian really find Boyd a couple times. I think he's going to find Charlie Jones early, and the offense is going to be into a rhythm, and they're going to start fast. Jake Lisco, fast start for Trevor Siemian.
Wow, that hot take saying goes
right
straight
here
to your head.
Oh baby!
Need one of these backup quarterbacks to emerge. Need some of these backup linemen to really distinguish themselves from one another. And then it's fun to see the skill guys. It's less of an anxiety feeling for me around the skill guys than it is about the backup linemen and the quarterbacks. But even then, we're talking about backups and good test, especially early on in the game, hopefully against some of those Atlanta Falcons starters. We'll be back after the game with some takeaways. Hopefully we have some offense to talk about this week after it was tough going and busy for Evan McPherson last week. I think Evan's got all the preseason work he needs. So time for some touchdowns, hopefully, for this offense. And until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.